Hello, my name is Tehila, High Priestess of the Coven of the Open Mind, and this is Wicca 101 Abridged. Hail and welcome. The topic this time covers the difference between religions, beliefs, and practices. So we'll discuss the distinction between Wicca and other forms of paganism. We'll talk about what constitutes a lineage, and we'll talk about some well-known or common lineages or Wiccan traditions. The starting point for this discussion is that beliefs are distinctly separate from practices. In the Oxford Dictionary, belief is defined as the acceptance that something exists or is true, especially without proof, or the trust, faith, or confidence in something or someone. So this therefore refers to such things as how the universe came to be, what the purpose of existence is, and whether or not there is a defined consciousness or God. As it is used within Wicca, practice is defined as the actual application or use of an idea, belief, or method as opposed to the theories relating to it. Both of these definitions are straight from Oxford Dictionary. So this means that practice, on the other hand, is not concerned with what someone believes, not in any sense really. It's concerned with how someone goes about upholding those beliefs. So the set of beliefs, myths, and themes that many witches hold to be true is called Wicca, while witchcraft is the name given to a collection of practices. So the practices may, while they're often used by Wiccans, they may also be used by others who do not consider themselves Wicca. Often within Wicca, the terms Wicca and witch are used interchangeably. However, like I said, there are many who consider themselves witches who are not considered Wiccan. This is basically because witchcraft can be used by anyone on any religious path. Basically, it's the means to just about any spiritual or occult end. Within Wicca, witchcraft is a tool for empowerment, which is a key belief in Wicca. It helps Wiccans make real changes in the world, and witchcraft helps them exercise their beliefs. I'm going to cover Wiccan beliefs, which is a very big topic, in another video. There's basically like 5 or 6 things that all Wiccans generally believe, and then their interpretations of those things are different depending on their own personal interpretation and what lineage they're a part of and that kind of stuff. So Wicca is, this big thing that incorporates a lot of people, so we have to tackle it in small little sections. So for now, the only kind of belief that we're going to bring up is the Wiccan rede. There are witchcraft techniques that violate the Wiccan rede. So there are witches out there who do believe in cursing and that kind of thing. But the Wiccan rede says to harm none. So Wiccans would not use those witchcraft practices, even though they exist. The rede is kind of the clearest differentiating factor between a Wiccan witch and a witch of another variety. No one really believes that any type of witch is better than any other. Some people do believe that and have their noses in the air because there's crazy people in every religion, but most people don't think that way. There's no magical bonus awarded to Wiccans. There's no tangible perk to those who are initiated by other people, though I will talk about self-initiations. It's a very controversial topic in its own video. So the only real difference between a Wiccan witch and any other kind of witch is that a Wiccan has sworn an oath before a deity and their covens if they have one, and that it just basically strongly affirms their desire to harm none. Like I said, the rede is a lot longer than this, so I'm going to cover it and all the Wiccan beliefs in a separate video, but essentially harm none is what the rede boils down to, the Wiccan rede. So a rede, of course, is a statement of morality, how you're going to live your life. So the Wiccan rede is, if it harms none, do what you want. All the Wiccans have sworn this oath to deity and covens, so that leads us to ask, where are all of the Orthodox witches? And the answer to that really lies in the difference between beliefs and practices. This one is Orthodox. They have the exact same beliefs, attitudes, and modes of conduct, like moral conduct, as other people within their community. They usually have uniform beliefs, strict ideologies regarding what is and is not considered acceptable behavior. And, in extreme cases, this can result in mob mentality and even injustice. We've seen that. See that even still today in parts of the world, even parts of America. Of course, there are many people who know this feeling of ostracization very well. Orthopraxy, on the other hand, refers to a general correctness of action or practice only. It has nothing to do with beliefs, so it just talks about the way you do things. Everyone within a particular community will celebrate the same holidays on the same days and in very similar ways. They'll have the same special occasions. They'll do very similar things when they're seeking protection and healing or vitality. They might even have, similar folk tales, similar or popular music and food, like cultural similarities. Despite all of these similarities, there's usually differences in the actual belief within orthoprax communities. Some members have private personal names that they only use in their own personal practice. I do, for instance. Some people have entirely separate private deities or patrons from the ones that the rest of the coven uses. I'd say most people probably have both of those things within Wicca. That's pretty normal. Some covens do not have any specific deities at all, just referring to the god and goddess or the lord and lady or the wise ones, and they don't give them names or believe in aspects. So there's a lot of variety. Most witches are orthoprax, not orthodox, but an example of an orthodox Wiccan coven might be Dianic Wicca, where they all believe there is a goddess. There's no god, there's one goddess. The goddess's name is Diana. All these myths about her, They all worship her in the same way. They all have the same beliefs. So, orthodox. That's really uncommon. Most covens are orthoprax. Gardnerianism is probably the biggest and most orthoprax that you get. They have a degree and initiation system that prevents anyone who doesn't know their exact form of witchcraft to claim to know that form or to know those practices. So that maintains the integrity of their form of magical practices. For this reason, Gardnerian covens that are around today are practicing witchcraft in the exact same way that Gerald Gardner did, probably back in the 1900s. They say with pride that once you are trained in one of these traditions, there's no way you could go about things in any other way, simply because you wouldn't want to, not even in your personal practice. You'll always forever be this one specific kind of witch. So bear in mind, though, that even despite that, they all do have still some individual differences and preferences, small deviations. Of course, it's like everyone has their own private practice as well that may be a lot like their coven practice, but is still a little bit different. And private personal beliefs are obviously permitted in most covens. Most covens are orthoprax. I don't know of any coven that would kick you out for having a certain belief, but I'm sure that there are some. There's some crazy people. Like I said, there's crazy people in every religion. So then we talked about two different kinds of lineages. We could talk about what a lineage actually is. Oftentimes Wicca is classified as a pagan religion. Lately people have started to consider Wicca as being its own category, and I consider it to be its own category. That's because Wicca has different sects, so it's a lot like Christianity or Judaism in that way. In this case, we just call those sects lineages or traditions. These two terms are mostly used interchangeably, with little distinction. There is a major distinction that I'll talk about in a minute when it's relevant. The same lineage can and often does have a lot of individual covens within it. They're considered, a coven is a spiritual or religious family, people who come together to unify their practices or worship deity or perform magic together, and just support each other as a community. We've already mentioned two lineages, Dianic Wicca and Gardnerian, one Orthodox, one Orthoprax. Many of Gardner's initiates went on to have their own covens. That's why there are so many Gardnerian covens. This practice is referred to as hiving off the original coven. So if one coven has enough covens hive off of it, then the leader of that coven who initiated all these people is called a witch queen or king. Traditionally, it's when 13 covens have hived off of the original. Now, there are some who did initiate into the Gardnerian lineage and then actually left and started their own lineages later on. So these lineages are offshoots of Gardnerianism. There are others that are just derivatives, and offshoot and derivative has a very specific and important distinction. An offshoot is a lineage that came directly from someone who was at some point initiated in a BTW lineage. BTW stands for British Traditional Wicca or British Traditional Witchcraft, and it includes Gardnerianism and any offshoot of Gardnerianism, like Alexandrianism, Algard. There's a lot of them. Some in America, some in other countries. A lot of them are UK-based because that's where, Gardnerianism was founded. Some covens are called BTW derivatives, which means that they were merely influenced by the philosophies, beliefs, and practices of a BTW coven, but they are not really qualified to teach those lineages exactly, because whoever founded this other lineage can't verify that they were a member in a BTW coven, or they don't care to. So examples in this category would be like Aquarian Age Wicca, Blue Star, Celtic, and Seax Wicca. So they still feel very much like Gardnerian, Alexandrian Wicca, but they are distinctly different and distinctly their own unique thing. Some say that, hey, Gardner had his own lineage, and many of his students did as well, so therefore anyone should be able to, and that's why there's still more covens which are not really derived from anything in particular. They may incorporate more eclectic elements, often shamanistic practices, things that are very dated, even older than witchcraft. A lot of these include things like Lothlorien, which has a lot of animism in it, reclaiming, which is like a fairy tradition, and then we've already mentioned Dianic Wicca, so it would fit in this category. Wiccans that don't really fit into any category are often called eclectic witches. Some people consider this to be its own lineage, but I personally don't. The reason is that two different eclectic covens may have absolutely nothing in common, not a common source, no common traditions, no common practices, nothing. Furthermore, there is rarely a sense of lineage amongst eclectic witches. Most eclectic practitioners remain entirely solitary for much of their lives. You could argue that tradition is different than lineage, so that while a lineage refers to the passing down of traditions, tradition itself may refer to any group which has anything at all in common, even nothing in common, and then you could claim that eclectic is a tradition. But most really just treat eclectic as kind of the category that you shove people into when they don't fit into any other categories within Wicca. The open-minded lineage, so that's the lineage that I'm founding through the Coven of the Open Mind, that we're all founding together basically, and we named it together and everything. It doesn't really fit into any of these categories because it's not technically Wiccan. It's not even eclectic Wicca because we allow members from any religion with any title. It's completely unique from other covens and other lineages that exist right now. We basically add on to the degrees that people already have from other religions, or that they gained in their own time, through self-initiations, whatever the case may be. So we're kind of like a graduate school for witches, or not even just witches, just for open-minded, spiritual people. And, the idea is that we're organized around the fact that members may not want to conform their beliefs or practices to some standard, but they still want to be involved in a community, and they can't seem to find one that doesn't make them conform. So that's why we exist. Still, even if, a coven for solitary practitioners like this one sounds like too much involvement, and you're just kind of like a lone wolf and you're off doing your own spiritual thing, then you just remember that orthopraxy is really an adherence to a standard, but that standard can be defined by anyone. So if you are holding yourself accountable and sticking to the requirements of your own tradition, and you feel satisfied with your own practices, then you could consider yourself orthoprax if you wanted, even if you don't really fit into a coven. Though I suspect that most solitaries probably don't really care about those titles and labels, and that's why they're solitary. Just to summarize, Wicca is its own religion with specific beliefs shared by all who claim the title of Wiccan. We'll cover that in a coming video. There are witches who are plain pagan, not Wiccan at all, with beliefs nowhere close to the Wiccan standard. And then there's Wicca, which has solitary practitioners and myriad different lineages, each with their own practices, variations in belief and tradition, leaving us to sit and ponder which Wiccan witch is which. So thanks for watching Wicca 101 Abridged. My name is High Priestess Tehillah, and from all of us here in the Coven of the Open Mind, blessed be.